This is the Wendland. It's a small region between here, Berlin, and Hamburg, pretty much in the middle. There's just about 50,000 people living there. But since 1995, for 1 week every year, the Wendland became a main attraction. 30,000 visitors would turn the region into a place where human rights were suspended. What happened? Well, the Wendland was chosen to be the ultimate nuclear disposal site. And it turned also into the center of the anti-nuclear movement. People would sit on the rail tracks to prevent the trains from coming in. And the 30,000 visitors were actually policemen. There was one police officer for every 2 residents. And you probably guessed it by now, I grew up there. When my grandma, she was living very close to the rail tracks, when she went out for grocery shopping in the fields or anywhere, she would be searched by the police from head to toe. And my granny, she was the sweetest person on earth. That's her at the diamond wedding. In 1997, I was in the middle of my final exams. Police wanted to take quarter in our gym. Well, we students, we didn't like that. So what did we do? Well, we occupied the gym. And within hours, the local farmers, they came with their tractors, put a fence around the gym to keep the police away. And we were inside the gym, occupying it. Our school director, he was furious. He let us fail all the exams. It wasn't a really good timing for myself. I was even expelled, being in the finals. Well, they underestimated the public pressure. On day 2 of this occupation, I found myself in front of national television. It was the biggest private broadcaster in the country, RTL. And I cited our demands. First, the police should not take these gyms now or in the future. Second, all the exams would have to be repeated. And third, no one, including myself, should be expelled from school. Well, the public pressure built, and they signed. Yes, they had to sign a contract. It was just 1 page. So on the left, it was us signing as the students. And on the right, it was the school director, the police, the district government, and with the help of God, because the church was moderating the whole process, we won our first small battle for democracy. 6 years later, I found myself in Hyde Park. It was February the 15th, 2003. It was the biggest demonstration in British history. 2 million people marched against the war on Iraq. I was studying in London at the time, and I helped to organize these protests. George W. Bush, president at the time, he was determined to go into war. He claimed that Saddam Hussein had chemical weapons of mass destruction, and he wanted the Brits to follow him into war. And despite the public opinion being against this war, just a couple weeks after this demonstration, the biggest in British history, Westminster Parliament voted to join the United States and go to war. Well, we all know that Iraq never had weapons of mass destruction, and that this was a lie to start this war. Just imagine what the world would look like without this war. no deserts of destruction in the Middle East, probably no ISIS, and I would even claim less right-wing extremism over here, because people wouldn't have to leave the Middle East as refugees. Well, this was the time when I came about this campaign. It's the Howard Dean campaign. Howard Dean was the governor of Vermont at the time, and he was seeking the presidential nomination for the Democratic Party in 2003. He was the first candidate running a campaign entirely online. He collected millions of dollars, but he was an underdog. At the end, he didn't make it. But he inspired me of the power of the internet to strengthen democracy. I mean, 2003, that was the time before smartphones even existed, and also Facebook wasn't around. So after my studies in London, I moved back to Hamburg. And in Hamburg, I came across a referendum campaign. In Hamburg, at the time, we had one of the most undemocratic electoral systems in the entire country. It was a so-called closed list system. You had one vote only, and you literally had to give it away to a party. Because in the forerun to the elections, the parties would nominate a list of candidates, and you had no influence on that list whatsoever. Usually you would expect that you can vote for people that you like and that you like their agenda. But in Hamburg, it was actually the party leadership determining the list. And we had members of parliament that were applying for the mandate again. They went on holidays because their seat in parliament was pretty much guaranteed when they were on top of that list. So I joined the referendum campaign because I knew members of parliament were too detached from the people in Hamburg. And in June 2004, against the two major parties in Hamburg, it was the Social Democratic Party at the time and the Conservatives, we won this referendum campaign. And ever since, Hamburg has one of the most democratic electoral systems. You have 5 votes that you can freely distribute among your top candidates. But there was a problem. How would people actually find the candidates that they like? How would they screen the candidates and prepare for elections? How would they benefit from this super democratic system? Well, this is when I met Boris. And you can see, I'm the one to the left. More hair is not always better. Well, we created a website in 2004 called Parliament Watch. And the idea was to give voters a full profile of all candidates and politicians in parliament or applying for parliament. We would record their voting behavior, their committee memberships, their extra earnings, and most importantly, you could ask them questions, public and online. And it worked. People were actually answering questions through Parliament Watch. The website is called Abgeordnetenwatch in German. And originally, I mean, we were complete volunteers. I mean, the only expenses that we had, Boris and myself, were like €4 every month just to pay the service. Originally, we thought, well, we just need to cover that for Hamburg. But then suddenly in 2005, Gerd Schröder, chancellor at the time, he called out for a surprisingly new election. And then we extended the website to the entire country. We had more than 2,000 candidates from 299 voting districts. And millions of people were using the website to prepare for the upcoming elections in 2005. This guy is called Per Steinbrück. He's not a big fan of Parliament Watch. And he's not a member of parliament anymore. He actually was quite an important politician. He ran against Angela Merkel at the last federal elections in 2013. We found out that he also ran from one paid speech to the next, making over €1 million in extra earning from banks and insurances the same companies that benefited from his policies when he was Minister of Finance during the banking crisis. We could even prove that Peer Steinbrück missed parliamentary sessions to make highly paid speeches instead. Well, when we confronted him on this TV show with our findings, that was the end of his campaign. But this was actually part of a much bigger problem. Believe it or not, Germany, until 3 years ago, did not ratify the United Nations Convention against Corruption. And that was because it was legal in this country to bribe members of parliament. When we heard about that, we knew this is something bigger. We needed to build a movement. And this is the time when I came across change.org. So I started my first campaign on the world's biggest petition platform. We collected signatures. We had several deliveries. This is not money, this is actually signatures. And eventually, we changed it, and Germany could ratify this convention. Well, this is my personal story of empowerment. But what about you? What if you want to change something, but you don't know how? One last story, and it's actually one of my favorite petitions on change.org. I want to introduce you to Mariana and Peter Grimmenstein. Mariana is a 70-year-old retired flute teacher from Lüdenscheid. And when I started at change.org, I came across this tiny little newspaper article reporting that Mariana tried to take the government to court to stop the free trade agreement with Canada, CETA at the time. Her case was rejected, so I invited Mariana to start a petition on change.org and try over again. That's what she did. Within 2 weeks, she collected 60,000 signatures of people supporting her case. Well, this time I recommended that she should get a professional lawyer because her last lawsuit she tried all by herself. So she hired a lawyer. But Mariana didn't have the money to pay him. She invited all the big NGOs like Foodwatch and Greenpeace to join her, and she was completely ignored. So what we did is that we collected the money among her signers, and within 3 days, they chipped in more than 18,000 euros. Mariana's only concern at the time was how to stop the influx of money. Well, then basically what she did is she asked people to formally join the case. You could do that by printing off a PDF, filling it in writing, and posting it back, traditional mail, to her private home in Lüdenscheid. Well, first the postman came by foot. Then he had to take the bike. Eventually, he had to take the car because Mariana received almost 70,000 letters. This is what her living room looked like. But more importantly, this time, her case got accepted. And we were all invited, and we were going to the Constitutional Court last October with Peter, Mariana, myself, and the change.org team. And there, we met Sigmar Gabriel. At the time, he was still the vice chancellor and the economic minister. And he was actually defending the government personally, sometimes like shifting away the lawyers and just stepping in himself. And when he entered the courtroom, I introduced him to Mariana. So he turned around and said, "So you are the person that brought me to court." And it sounds incredible, but this is exactly what Mariana has done. She achieved something that formerly only big organizations could do. She took the government to court, and she won. The Constitutional Court ordered that that CETA can only enter force for the European part, not for the German part, that all the secret courts that big corporations could use to sue the government over environmental and social issues, that these secret courts cannot enter force, and that the German government must always retain the right to withdraw from this agreement. When you ask Mariana whether she could imagine to run for parliament herself, she would tell you, well, I'm already going in and out of parliament, and I'm meeting all these important people. Democracy in Germany is about 60 years old, and it's not perfect. But when a retired flute teacher from Lüdenscheid can take the government to court and stop the free trade agreement, then you can do it too. Thank you.